welcome to Woodshop 101, a woodworking audio podcast geared toward the hobby weekend woodworker. Your hosts for the show are Jeremy Crawford and Drew Shore. Join these two different craftsmen for a lighthearted banter about everything woodworking, online education, and how they produce content. Topics could include the latest news, tips, tricks, and designs, to include furniture, crafts, and shop projects.
Hey guys, this is Jeremy. I just want to let you know that Drew, Sam, and myself have decided to take a few weeks off for summer vacation. But instead of you not hearing from us at all, we've decided to each record our own little segment that you will be able to hear. You'll get one segment this week. We're going to take next week off, and then you'll get the following two segments for the couple weeks after that. And then on August 8th, we will be back with our regular programming. We really appreciate you guys sticking out with us. And the summer's just been chaotic for us, and we just decided that we needed a little break and to be able to catch up on personal things. So stay tuned. This is episode 46 with Drew.
Today we're going to talk about some Q&A that are coming through to the Woodshop 101 podcast, as well as the RH Woodshop website. The reason why we're doing it this way is mainly because we are having some scheduling conflicts between myself, Jeremy, and Sam, and like last week, we are going to have to keep consistency by doing something a little special. We do plan on doing a full episode very, very shortly, but until then, this episode is going to have to be a little bit of a filler, so we hope that you'll have plenty of patience with us while we get through this little bit of a transition. There's just been a lot of things going on, so we just kind of have to work around it. Now, this episode is going to be one of our fast and loose, like I said before, so we'll just get right down to the questions. Now, some of these questions I've had come through on my website. Some of these questions I've had asked several times by many different viewers, and I've got one or two that came from specific viewers that I will mention. Now, one question that I've had come across many times is what kind of a saw blade do I specifically use for my projects, and how do I know when to change my saw blades? Also, what tooth count do I use? Saw blades can vary in many different teeth count, and they all do different things. So probably one of the best blades to have in your arsenal is a combination blade. Generally, these range around the 50 tooth count area, and are pretty well suited for ripping as well as cross-cutting. Now, I would not recommend these for plywood, mainly just because the thin veneer on plywood just cannot handle such a coarse tooth count. So you might want to have a plywood or melamine type blade in your arsenal as well. The types of blades that I use are made from Freud, and I have a combination 50 tooth blade, I have a glue line rip blade, and a plywood and melamine blade. And I tend to get by pretty well with those three. I keep a couple of full kerf blades, which I typically use the most, mainly because they do not flex. And the plywood and melamine blade is a thin kerf blade, but because I mainly use it just to cut plywood down to size on cross-cutting as well as ripping, it really doesn't affect my cutting with the thin kerf. But for the most part, the full kerf blades are something that you really want to have in your arsenal. The reason why I say that is because, like I said, for one, they don't flex around when you push from side to side, which sometimes happens with wood binding. I've also used them many times to cut half laps, going back and forth, taking little snippets of wood as I go across the blade, and using a thin kerf blade to do that is not necessarily a good thing to do. But it makes it really easy for measuring, because a full kerf blade is an 1/8 inch thick, and a thin kerf is a 32nd of an inch smaller. And if you're going all the way down to 1/8 of an inch in your measurements, that can sometimes really throw you off. So those three blades are probably one of the ones that I would tend to keep most frequent, and the combination blade you'll find you'll use quite often. Now, I did get a question from Stuart Ratliff asking about countersink bits. His question was if I could pick your brain for a moment. I am needing some countersink bits, but I am unsure if I should be set or should be a set or a specific bit, like an 1/8 inch bit, and could be with that one size, since most of my holes are going to be the same size unless I'm using lag screws. Basically, he's wanting to know if he should carry just one bit size or have multiple sizes. Whenever I select countersink bits, I typically buy the 3-pack sets. They're different sizes, and right offhand, I'm not sure exactly what those sizes are. However, they do make plug sets to fill in those countersink holes, and I typically buy the sets that match the countersink bits. The bit that actually goes in the countersink drill itself is generally a little bit smaller than a typical screw. That way, I still had plenty of bite in the wood. So, if you're looking for a specific kind of countersink, I would typically get a either a counterbore or countersink bit that matches a plug cutting bit. That way you'll have the option to plug your countersink holes with the same species of wood if you so chose to do so. And that would probably solve a lot of your dilemma on which ones to choose. So find yourself some plug cutting bits and then look at your countersinks and see if you can find all the same size. I typically do about, I think it's like a quarter inch, and I go up to 3/8, I believe, for the most part, since most dowel rods are around that same size. But plug cutters, I typically use more because you can get face grain with those instead of end grain like you do with dowels. So hopefully that'll answer your question there, Stuart. Now, Jeremy and I did get a question on the last episode that we did without Sam from David Borg. He sent me some feedback, kind of, as well as a question. But he said that they are looking for a hardwood source around Oklahoma that are not too crazy expensive. Namely, I won't mention the store. Let's just say it's opposite of Rockler. And he said he lives up near Tulsa, but are not against driving if we need to. He did say, my son has his for few orders. Mason is the one you guys gave the shout out to. And one of them is a 2x3 cutting board, which is almost a countertop, but they were willing to pay. It will require some Purple Heart for exotic and also plenty of domestic. So he's really needing something that he can find a good amount of really nice domestic and exotic wood for a cheap price. I really don't have a huge selection here in Oklahoma City, and I'm not too familiar with Tulsa. But here in the city, I typically use Phoenix hardwoods for a lot of my domestics if I don't need a quick drive to a big box store just to get what I need. Because mainly Phoenix is open during the times that I'm working, so it's really difficult to get the orders that I want. There is also another organization that is in central OKC called McKinley Hardwood and Lumber. I've never been to that store in particular, but they are one of two that I am familiar with. But like I said, I typically go to Phoenix. But I did do a search on Google for the Tulsa area, and I found two dealers that might be of interest to you. One of them is Schaller Hardwood. That's Schaller. Looks like they are located on East 46th Street, and I did find a White and Sun Hardwoods located on East 7th Place. So you might give them a look and just see what you think of those. Hopefully their prices are pretty comparable to what I find at Phoenix and McKinley. And one of the last questions that I get asked quite often, and it's getting to the point where I think I need to put a frequently asked questions in my website, but it's basically what kind of camera equipment or filming equipment and editing software that I use for my videos, because I tend to get a lot of feedback and compliments on how I do my editing and how well my picture looks. But back when I first started, I really didn't have a lot of money to spend on camera equipment, and I already had a little JVC or Canon maybe it was a Canon Vixia is what it was. I started with a JVC, and it didn't have a mic output, and I wanted to have some better audio because it was so echoey every time I talked. So I upgraded to the Canon Vixia, which did have a mic output, but it was still the same kind of camcorder. Not a very good picture. Even though it said it recorded in 1080p, it still didn't look like it. So I did upgrade my mics so I could use the mic input jacks, and I used the Asden Wireless Pro, and that really, really helped my audio. I still have to do a little bit of editing with the audio once I get it imported because I do have a hissing noise in the background that I have to deal with. But once I get that taken out, the audio sounds great. After I was sponsored by Rockler, I was able to upgrade my camera equipment to a Canon T3i Rebel, which is a DSLR camera. And it works out very, very well. Now, the only downside about using that kind of camera is that it does not have an auto zoom while you are in recording mode, and it does not have an autofocus. So I'm kind of having to do everything manually, which a lot of the YouTubers that use that camera do. And it's also safe to say that if it did have the autofocus, you would be able to hear it during the recording process because it is a rather loud focusing mechanism inside the lens. But once I have something that I can point the camera at and focus on, it's really not a big deal. I just press record and go walk around in front of the camera and do what I need to do, come back around and hit stop. But my audio and camera equipment is working out very well. And so is my editing equipment, which leads to what software I use. And whenever I got my Mac, it came with iMovie, which I did use for a very, very long time, but it had its limitations quite a bit. So I, later on, after I got sponsored, upgraded to Final Cut Pro, which is a really, really banging software for Mac. And it has all bells and whistles that I need to make the kind of videos that I do. It still has some limitations of some fancy editing that I've seen Jay Bates use when he clones himself. The Mac can do that too, but it's just not as intricate. And unfortunately, that's something that I would really like to do, but I just unfortunately cannot. I still can clone myself, just not in the way that I want. But other than that, that's really all I use. I keep an external hard drive attached to my computer thanks to a tip from April Wilkerson to keep my hard drive from being so loaded up with excess raw footage that I have to pick and choose from whenever I upload my SD card from my camera to my computer. If I have tons of footage, it loads up my hard drive and I've got hardly any space to work with and it bogs down the computer. So that's basically what I use, and it lasts probably like 2 or 3 days on one charge, and that's plenty of time to get a video recorded. And even if it runs a little bit longer, I just take the battery out, let it charge overnight, and pick up where I left off the next night. So you might look into those cameras. The camera itself is about $600 roughly. Back when I was using the Palm camcorders, those were about $250. The wireless mics are about $200, I believe, maybe $250. And the editing software, the Final Cut Pro, I believe, is probably $250, maybe $300. I cannot remember right offhand. But it's worth every penny if you like to YouTube and especially want to make a living out of it. It'll pay for itself in the long run. So guys, that pretty much wraps up the question and answers that I had. I've got a lot of things going on in the shop coming up. I just finished the sliding dovetail miter joint picture frame, which I will begin editing as soon as I stop this recording. And that should be coming out hopefully tonight or tomorrow, which will be Wednesday-ish. Or Tuesday, maybe. I don't know. Sometimes these days run together. But I've got to get busy, and I hope you guys enjoyed this short little episode. I'm sorry that it wasn't up to your expectations with Sam. I know everybody misses her. I know Jeremy and I do. So If you guys want to get in contact with any of us individually, we each have websites. Sam is DIYHuntress.com, and my website is rhwoodshop.com, and Jeremy's is countrysideworkshop.com. Each of us have our own contact page there. You just fill it out, and it'll send us an email. We're pretty quick on responding. And if you do send us something in particular to one of our websites, still keep listening to the to the podcast, because we tend to take those questions and introduce them to the episodes that we have upcoming. So you might just hear it answered there. The Woodshop 101 podcast also has an email that you can send directly to, which is woodshop101podcast@gmail.com. And you can also leave us a voicemail at our really fancy voicemail phone number that can be called from any landline, cell number, or basically anything that makes a phone call. And the area code is 409-234-3959. There you can leave us a voicemail. We'll feature it on the air and answer your question. We really enjoy those voicemails, but we really enjoy the emails and questions that we get too, and those really help bring our podcast to a new level to answer any and all questions from you viewers. And we greatly appreciate all your feedback and your questions, and we hope to see you guys and hear from you guys on the next episode. So keep the questions coming, be safe in your shops, and from Jeremy, Sam, and myself, we want to wish you guys well, and 1, 2, 3, boom!